She was forced to marry her boss, a millionaire in a coma. A month later, he woke up, the pen slipped between Noah's fingers. Her nails were chewed, her shoulders hunched with fatigue. Valmont Corp's meeting room was chilly. Even in the late spring heat, the air conditioning seemed to conspire with the silence of the lawyers in suits. She hardly understood what they were saying. Words like power of attorney, nuptial agreement, legal validity, passed like deaf thunder. Only one thing was clear: they wanted her to marry Adrian Valmont. Noah looked up, searching for some glimmer of humanity in the cold faces around the table, but all she saw were leather folders, stacked contracts, and a screen showing Adrian's medical condition: stable, in a coma, intubated in a hospital room 2 hours away. 1 month, Miss Santoro, repeated the neutral voice of Helena Vargas, the woman in the dark blue blazer who was leading the negotiation. After that, the contract is terminated. You'll receive the agreed amount, sign the documents as the legal wife, and Valmont Corp doesn't collapse. Nice wife. Noah hardly knew Adrian. She had spoken to him 3 times since she had been promoted to the central team. He was brilliant, silent, inaccessible.
His presence was like marble.
Beautiful, hard and impossible to get close to. She never imagined that this man now, unconscious, would become, by a cold and desperate agreement, her husband. But next month's rent was already overdue.
Luna,
her sister, needed expensive tests, and the amount promised in the contract could keep them both off the street for a whole year. Noah took a deep breath, squeezing her eyes shut until everything became a blur. What if he wakes up before the month? She asked breathlessly. Helena didn't smile. Then he's in for an interesting surprise. The signature came out shaky, and with it, the rest of his piece. She left the company headquarters without seeing the sky. The city was still the same: honking horns, rushing, too many people walking nowhere. But for Noah, everything had changed. In her handbag, there was now a provisional marriage certificate, on her finger, a borrowed ring, and in her heart, a guilt that was already beginning to ache. In the Valmont mansion, time had a different rhythm. The walls seemed too high, the corridors were too wide. Everything was designed to impress or intimidate, and she, with her small suitcase and worn-out shoes, seemed like a shadow intruding on that world. Your room is at the end of the east corridor,
he said.
Don't touch the main wing. Mr. Gale Valmont doesn't like surprises, said the housekeeper, without even looking him in the eye. Noah climbed the stairs like someone invading a temple. Every step seemed to ask, "What are you doing here?" She didn't know either. The room was too big for someone like Noah. It had a balcony overlooking the inner garden, a high bed with starched sheets, and an armchair that seemed to fit her entire life folded up in modest clothes. No flowers, no photographs, just plain walls and imposing furniture. She took off her shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence was so thick that she could hear her own heartbeat. The mansion made no ordinary noises. There were no children running around, no hurried footsteps in the hallway, just the sound of her steady breathing, and the clock in the hall, slowly marking the beginning of her new life. Married, to a man I couldn't even look in the eye. The next day, at 7 a.m., a maid knocked on the door with a dress in hand. Dark blue, fitted, discreet, but elegant enough to make it clear that Noah was no longer just any employee.
Mr.
Gale would like to see you in the main office, she said, without explaining why. She got dressed in silence, tied up her hair, and walked down the stairs with the firmness that only fear can give. Gale Valmont's office was less imposing than his brother's, but livelier. A discreet bar in the corner, open books on the table, and a huge family portrait on the wall. Where Adrian, in the center, didn't seem to know how to smile. Gale was on his back, looking out of the window. He was wearing a white shirt, the sleeves folded up, and his brown hair was carefully disheveled. He turned slowly, with a half smile, but his gaze was that of someone measuring a chess piece before moving it.
So,
"You're Noah Santoro?" He didn't ask, he said. "Yes, sir," You don't have to call me sir. He approached slowly. After all, you're part of the family now. She swallowed dryly. I'm just fulfilling a contract. Gail let out a short, almost gentle laugh. We all are, darling. All of us. He sat down at the table and picked up an empty glass, twirling it in his fingers. You know, Noah, the last person to see Adrian before the accident was you. She widened her eyes. What? You gave him the merger documents, right? That was the last meeting. After that, the helicopter crashed. Coincidence, or not? He said, smiling with his lips, but not with his eyes. I had nothing to do with it. Of course he didn't. He replied, a little too lightly. But in this world, appearance is everything. And now you're the widow who became a wife before the wake. Interesting, don't you think? Noah felt her stomach sink. The conversation wasn't a direct accusation. It was worse. It was a subtle threat, a warning that in that house, no one was innocent until proven guilty. That evening, she returned to her room with heavy footsteps. On the balcony, a dim light could be seen coming from the hospital wing of the mansion, where Adrian was kept under private care. The only connection between then and now. She looked at that light and murmured, if only you could hear, tell me there's still a way out. But Adrian remained motionless, on the other side of the house, and on the other side of the truth. The medical wing of the Valmont mansion was as silent as an expensive tomb. Double glazing, clear walls, bespoke furniture. Everything was impeccably clean, almost sterile, too cold for someone alive. Noah didn't know if she was allowed to be there. But that night, the corridors were empty, and the curiosity unbearable. She pushed the door open slowly, like someone invading a sanctuary. Adrian was lying on an adjustable bed, surrounded by tubes and monitors. His skin was pale, his hair messy, his jaw firm, like that of someone who has never learned to surrender. Even unconscious, there was something imposing about him, as if his body, even in sleep, carried the memory of power. Noah stood by the door. The only thing that could be heard was the constant beeping of the heart monitor, and the hum of an infusion machine next to the bed. I don't know why I'm here, she whispered, almost ashamed. I'm not your wife. I'm nothing. And yet, I signed that paper. Her voice faltered. She approached him slowly, and pulled up a chair. She sat down, looking at him like someone looking into a cloudy mirror. I was told you wouldn't wake up so early, that it was safe to pretend, that it was enough to last a month. She bit her lower lip. But they didn't tell me I'd feel guilt, or fear of you, or pity. Adrian didn't move. She lowered her eyes, fiddling nervously with her fingers. I just wanted to pay for Luna's medicine, you know? That was it. And for some reason, you were the price. Silence. Noah leaned a little closer, almost in a whisper. If you can hear me, forgive me. Then it happened. A brief sound, subtle. His breathing changed. The machine beeped just once, a slight increase in his heartbeat. Noah froze. She looked at the monitor, then at his face. Nothing else moved, but the impression remained there, like an invisible presence in the room, as if Adrian's sleeping body had recognized her voice. She stood up hurriedly, backing away. At the door, she looked at him one last time. Please, don't wake up now. And then she left, unaware that, at that very moment, Gail was watching her from the security camera, installed high up on the wall, away from the monitor, with a glass of whiskey in his hand, and a dark look on his face. Interesting, he muttered. Very interesting. In the days that followed, Noah tried to avoid the medical ward. She pretended not to hear the involuntary call that pushed her towards that door. She followed her routine, as part of an invisible choreography. Coffee at 8, silent reading in the library at 10, discreet lunches in silence. As if her presence there wasn't a grotesque theater supported by documents. But something had changed since that night. On the third day, Adrian's private doctor, Dr. Morales, appeared at the mansion with a briefcase in his hand and a tense expression. He spent the whole morning confined with Helena, and when he left, avoided eye contact with everyone. Noah saw. and she felt a chill in her stomach that she couldn't explain. The following afternoon, she was walking through the inner garden when she heard hurried footsteps in the glazed corridor of the east wing. She hid by instinct and saw Helena hurrying out of the infirmary, on her cell phone whispering, "Yes." He moved his fingers today. No, he hasn't spoken yet, but he's reacting. Silence. If he wakes up, we'll have to adjust the strategy. Noah stepped back, her eyes wide. Adrian was waking up. Time, which had already seemed to be slipping away, now flowed like sand between his fingers. That evening, Gael appeared in the library, without an invitation, without warning. He carried 2 glasses of drink and a charm that seemed rehearsed. "You've been avoiding everyone, including me," he said, handing Noah a glass. "I'm not here to socialize, but you're the wife of the most powerful man in the house. Technically, you're the most influential woman of the moment." She wanted to laugh, but she couldn't. "Adrian's going to wake up," I said, staring at him. "And when he does, all of this will be over." Gael smiled, but there was something about his smile that had no color. "Or it starts for real." He moved a little closer. "You know what I find curious about you, Noah," he murmured. "You have no idea what you represent here, and yet everyone is afraid of you, because you're the only piece in this game that no one can predict." She held the glass tightly. "I'm not a piece of work. We all are." And then he left, leaving a feeling in the air that the tables were about to turn. Hours later, Noah couldn't resist. She went back to the medical ward. This time, Adrian seemed different. His breathing was steadier. The fingers of his right hand slightly curved. And perhaps it was his imagination. His head tilted a few millimeters to the side, as if searching for a distant sound. She came closer. "Are you really waking up?" "Nothing." But as I lightly touched his fingertips, an involuntary movement, almost imperceptible, and a new sound on the monitor, a variation in the beat. Noah stepped back, her eyes watered. The end was coming, but not as she had predicted. The shrill sound of the monitoring machine wasn't enough to get anyone to the room in time. Adrian opened his eyes slowly. The white ceiling of the infirmary blinded him for a second. His body was heavy, his mouth was dry, and his head was a blur, as if someone had wiped weeks off his memory with a dirty sponge. He tried to move his fingers. He managed. He tried to speak. Nothing. But he saw it. He saw the name on the white bracelet attached to his wrist. Adrian Valmont, married. Spouse's name, Noah Santoro Valmont. His eyes narrowed. His expression hardened. Who? The room filled with footsteps a few minutes later. Medical staff. Dr. Morales, Helena, all talking at the same time. "He's awake. He's conscious. Stay calm. Avoid stress." But Adrian was on the alert. Watching, capturing faces, looking for what had been changed without his consent. "What happened?" he whispered, hoarsely, straining his vocal cords. "A helicopter crash," said the doctor. "But you're alive, Adrian. And you'll recover." He looked at Helena. "And who is Noah Santoro?" Silence fell like a blade. Helena took a deep breath. "Your wife." Adrian's eyes flashed with confusion and anger. "I'm not married." It is now. That same afternoon, Noah was called to the medical ward. Her heart was racing. Her hands were cold. Everything inside her told her to run, but the contract was clear. She had to be there when he woke up. When she opened the door, she found him awake, sitting partially up, with tubes still connected, and an expression that could cut stone. "So it's you," he said, his voice scratchy, his gaze hard. "The woman they say is my wife." Noah tried to speak, but no sound came out. He measured her from head to toe. "Tell me, is it true?" She nodded, almost in a whisper. "Why, she gasped for air, pressured. "The company needed a signature. It was just an agreement. 1 month, and you agreed to marry a man in a coma." The question was a shot, cold, slow. She lowered her eyes. "I needed the money. My sister." He didn't hear the rest. He closed his eyes for a moment. "Get out," She didn't move. Now, he repeated. And she left. Not knowing if he hated her for using him, or if he hated himself for not remembering anything. Meanwhile upstairs, Gale watched the scene through the cameras. He took a sip of wine, and muttered, "Let the show begin." Adrian hadn't slept since he woke up. The images came in fragments, the sound of the helicopter's propeller, the flash, the impact, and then the emptiness. But now, what tormented him most wasn't the accident. It was the face of the woman who had entered the room as if she belonged there. Noah. The name meant nothing to her, but her eyes said it all. She was no ordinary scammer. She wasn't naive, nor was she insolent. She was difficult to read, and Adrian hated not understanding. The next morning, he asked them to bring documents, contracts, folders, everything involving Valmont Corp over the last 30 days. When he saw the paperwork bearing Noah Santoro Valmont's signature, something in his stomach churned. How did someone like her get access to that? Asked the lawyer. The board and the legal team voted for the legality of the agreement. It was the only way to keep the company under control, in the face of a leadership vacuum. And you think that's normal? The lawyer swallowed. No, but it was necessary. Adrian looked out of the window. The mansion looked even darker now. I want to talk to her, for real, alone. Noah entered the main meeting room. She was pale but firm. Adrian was at the head of the table, wearing a suit, still weak, but regaining the bearing that made him so intimidating. "Sit down," he said directly. She obeyed in silence. "Explain it to me." No embellishments, no excuses. "Why did you do it?" Noah was slow to reply. "Because I was desperate." Adrian remained silent. She continued. "I didn't know it would hurt so much. By someone who doesn't even know my name." He stared at her hard. But something in his expression softened for a second. "Then why didn't you leave?" "Because I signed a contract, and because..." Her voice faltered. "My sister Luna had a crisis, and I needed the hospital. The company paid." Adrian leaned back, observing every detail. "You know that, if I wanted to, I could undo everything, send you away now, and file a lawsuit." She nodded, her eyes watering. "No, and I'm not going to beg you to stay. But I'm not your enemy." He didn't answer. She stood up. "No, I'm going to give back everything I've received. It's not about money, Noah." She stopped. He lowered his eyes. "It's about the fact that I woke up and discovered that my life had been manipulated while I wasn't even breathing on my own." Silence. "I understand you," she said. "Because that's what they've done to me all my life." And then he left. In the library, Gale was lurking as usual. He waited for her to pass before appearing in the doorway, pretending to be surprised. "Is the torture session over?"
He's hurt,
Noah said wearily. "Or he's learning to like you." She walked past him without answering. But Gale smiled, because he knew that the more Adrian got involved with Noah, the more vulnerable he became. Noah tried to keep her distance. In the days that followed, she avoided running into Adrian in the corridors, spent her meals in silence, and refused all invitations from the team to meetings. She was invisible again, or tried to be. But now Adrian saw her. He saw every restrained gesture, every averted glance, every interrupted sentence, and that bothered him more than he'd like to admit. "What's she like in person?" asked Dr. Morales, on her second consecutive day of physical therapy. "Cautious, respectful, and brave. Not many people would have faced that house the way she did." Adrian didn't reply, but that answer played on his mind for the rest of the morning. In the afternoon, Noah was in the garden, watering a flower bed that no one else tended. It was the only place in the mansion that seemed to have no rules. Adrian appeared without warning. No audible footsteps. He just appeared. "Is this your space?" She turned around with a gasp, dripping water on the hem of her skirt. "No, I'll just look after him. Calm me down." He was silent for a moment. Then he pointed to a flower. That one was dead when I was admitted. He replanted it. She said simply. Why? She looked up, serious. Because even something dead can bloom again, if someone takes care of it. The phrase hung between them, like an accusation, or an apology. Adrian looked away. You're different from what I imagined. And what did you imagine? A woman willing to do anything for money. She smiled, but it was a smile without joy. And you? What? You're different from what I imagined, too. He watched her. There was an unarmed vulnerability in her words. No drama, just the raw truth of someone used to not being heard. And for a moment, he wanted to know more. That night, Noah received a note under the door. There's a dinner tomorrow night. Not as a wife, as someone who deserves to be heard. No signature, but she knew who had written it. At the same moment, upstairs, Gail was throwing an empty bottle into the fireplace. He wakes up, barely sees, and already wants to play at redemption, he muttered. On the sofa, Helena couldn't hide her boredom. Are you going to act? Gail stood up, picking up a glass of wine. He had a month with her without opening his eyes. And you? I'm going to her with my eyes wide open. Noah spent the whole day unable to think of anything else. The ticket, the proposal, the doubt. Adrian wanted to talk. But why? Guilt? Curiosity? Or some strategy she didn't understand? She wore a simple black dress with thin straps and no jewelry. She pinned her hair up carefully, but let 2 strands fall at the sides, as if to say, I'm not a threat, but I'm not invisible either. The main dining room of the mansion looked like something out of an old movie. Chandeliers hanging over the long table, silverware perfectly aligned, and a fireplace that was lit even when it wasn't cold. Adrian was already sitting at the end, wearing a dark blazer and a shirt open at the neck. Less formal, more human. She hesitated at the door. I thought you'd changed your mind, he said when he saw her. I almost changed. And why hasn't it changed? Because I wanted to understand too. He gestured gently for her to sit down. Dinner was served in silence by 2 discreet members of staff. Exquisite food, expensive wines. Not a word, until Adrian broke the ice. Have you always been like this? Like what? Reserved, quiet, hard and delicate at the same time. She laughed in surprise. I never thought I'd hear that from someone like you. And what am I? A man used to not hearing no. Maybe that's why I slept for a month, he retorted sarcastically. They both laughed. For the first time. Tell me something real, he asked after the second glass of wine. A real thing, that nobody here knows. She thought for a few seconds. I hated my name as a child. Noah. I thought it was too short. Dull. And now? Now I like it. Because people never know what to expect from me. Adrian stared at her. His gaze was no longer one of distrust. It was that of someone trying to recognize a place to which he never belonged, but perhaps wanted to. I also have something real, he said. What? When I woke up and saw your name on the bracelet, I thought either I made a mistake, or someone saved my life. Silence. Deep. Almost comfortable. But the door suddenly opened. Gail. White shirt. Wet hair. Like he'd just got out of the pool. He couldn't hide his sarcastic smile. Am I interrupting anything? Adrian stiffened in his chair. Noah stood up immediately. We're having dinner, Adrian said dryly. I saw it, replied Gail, entering without permission. I just came to leave a message. He turned to Noah, ignoring his brother completely. The camera system was deactivated yesterday. Just so you know, the mansion has blind spots now, places where no one can see or hear. He winked. Interesting, huh? Noah remained motionless. Gail smiled and turned to leave. Have a good dinner, couple. The door closed, and with it, tension once again dominated the atmosphere. Adrian took a deep breath. Has he always been like this? I don't know, but he's scary. Are you afraid of him? I'm afraid of myself around him. Adrian looked at her more closely. For the first time he understood Noah wasn't fragile. She was someone who lived surrounded by wolves, trying not to become one of them. That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. Dinner with Noah had left more questions than answers. The way she looked away, the the weight of those words spoken between sips of wine, and the latent discomfort that took hold of her whenever Gale approached. He could tell, she was shaking inside, even when she tried to keep her composure. He got out of bed before dawn. He walked alone to the corridor of the security wing, where the camera recordings used to be stored. But the system was disabled. Just as Gale had said, Adrian had never had to worry about surveillance inside his own home. Now everything seemed like a maze, and he no longer knew who was watching whom. Hours later, in the library, he found Helena Vargas reading reports with her usual neutrality. "Did you know about the cameras being turned off?" She didn't look up. Gale has autonomy in some areas of the house. He asked for them to be disabled for privacy reasons. Adrian leaned in slightly. Privacy for whom? This time, Helena stared at him. "Maybe you should ask your wife." Adrian didn't answer, but he wrote it down in his mind like a burn mark. Later she saw Noah sitting alone near the glass greenhouse that connected the kitchen to the side garden. It was a space abandoned by the family, but she seemed to find it whenever she wanted to disappear. He approached slowly. "May I?" She nodded, without looking at him. Her hands were on her lap, motionless, as if waiting for a verdict. "My brother, is he pressuring you?" Noah's eyes were raised, direct, without beating around the bush. Gale doesn't need to raise his voice to make someone feel threatened. He just needs to smile. Adrian closed his eyes for a moment in silence. He had always been like that, brilliant, charming, and dangerous. "Why do you keep him around?" He bowed. "Because he's Valmont, and because cutting ties here means starting a war." She took a deep breath.
Yen.
"What about me? Have you decided what you're going to do?" "Not yet. But today, for some strange reason, I found myself wondering what it would have been like if I had met you before the accident. Without contracts, no lies, just you and me." Noah closed her eyes. And for the first time, he let a tear fall. Just one, but enough for Adrian to realize that she had also imagined the same thing. The next morning, time seemed to stand still. No unusual movement in the corridors. No notes under the door. No calls for meetings. Noah took advantage of the silence to breathe. But inside her, something was tight. I knew it wouldn't last. Adrian had also disappeared from the common areas. Since the conversation in the greenhouse, they both seemed to be treading in a field that was too delicate to explore again so soon. There was emotion, yes, but it was still covered by debris of mistrust and fear. She decided to walk to the back of the property, where an old semicircular glass greenhouse stood. It used to be empty, and it was the only place where the sun entered without asking permission. But when I arrived, the door was already ajar. "I thought you'd come here," said Gale's voice, emerging from between the shadows of the fogged glass. Noah froze. He walked slowly, with a black shirt folded over his arms, his hair still wet. "This place smells like you now. Do you know that?" She took half a step back, almost imperceptibly. "What do you want?" "Nothing, or everything. It depends on how much you resist." He smiled. "Adrian doesn't know you. He clings to a version of you that you yourself want to bury. But I really see you." She felt her throat close up. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're tired of being seen as a victim, that you don't want to be saved, that you want it deep down. For someone to want you without guilt, without contracts, no promises." He came closer. "I never asked for any of this," she whispered firmly. "No, but you need it," he said, and reached out as if to touch her face. Noah pulled away abruptly. "Don't touch me." The change in her tone was instantaneous. There was no fear, only a silent fury, contained by a thin line of self-control. Gale watched her for a second. Then he smiled wryly. "So you'd rather keep falling in love with a man who can't even remember the smell of his own life?" She didn't answer. "Careful, Noah," he murmured, already walking away. "My brother's heart may be beating again, but mine never stopped." And he left, leaving the scent of his perfume and a shadow in the room. Noah stood there, alone, feeling for the first time that she wasn't safe in that house. Not from Gale, and perhaps not even from herself. Adrian didn't need any witnesses. Noah's gaze was enough, as he crossed the corridor back to the house. She wasn't crying, she wasn't shaking, she wasn't saying anything. But there was something about the way she kept her arms clasped to her body, like someone who had just defended herself from an unwanted approach, and still felt the threat clinging to her skin. Adrian understood. That evening, Gale appeared as if nothing had happened, in a burgundy blazer and a crystal glass in his hands. He sat in front of the fireplace, lit a fine cigar, and turned slowly when he heard his brother's footsteps. At last, he said, smiling, "The king has come out of his coma, and decided to walk around the castle." Adrian stood with his arms crossed. "I need to talk to you, alone." "How formal. Go ahead. Helena has already gone to bed. It's about Noah." Gale let out the smoke slowly. "Of course, the wife who fell from the sky, or the contract. I'm not sure. What are you doing with her?" Strange question coming from a husband. "Don't play games with me. I'm not joking, Adrian. I'm just wondering how you could let yourself be affected by someone who came into your life when you weren't even awake. And yet, you're obsessed with her." Gale laughed. "Obsessed? No, just curious. You have a talent for desiring people only after you feel they can escape." Adrian approached, his eyes blazing. "Stay away from her. Or what? Are you going to kick me out of our family home? From the empire I held while you slept? You held up the facade. I saw the reports, the maneuvers, the alliances, the detours." Gale stood up slowly. "Are you threatening me?" "No, I'm warning you. If you touch her again, I'll forget we're brothers." The tension between them was like an electric wire stretched across the fireplace. Both immobile, both broken, both aware that what was at stake was not just Noah, it was control, the past, and everything that was never said between them. Gale took a step back and smiled. "Are you in love, Adrian?" Silence. "That changes everything," he muttered. "Because now I know where to hit you." And he left. Adrian stood there, alone, staring at the embers that crackled as if laughing at the illusion of peace he was still trying to sustain. The war had begun, and Noah was the center. The decision was born in silence, in the dark of his own bedroom. Noah looked at the small suitcase in the corner, the same one she had arrived with weeks before, still folded, still intact, as if part of her had known all along that it didn't belong there. The next morning, before sunrise, he dressed simply. Dark pants, a wool sweater and a light jacket. He picked up his suitcase. He walked down the stairs like someone treading on thin ice. He left an envelope on the library table. Inside, a handwritten letter, with no sweetness or sorrow, just the truth. "You asked me why I stayed. Now I have to go, not out of fear, but because if I stay another day, I won't know where the contract ends and what I feel begins." He left through the side door. No drivers, no goodbyes, as if she had never been anyone's wife. She had no idea where she was going. All she knew was that she needed to breathe away from that house, before she stopped knowing who she was. Adrian found the envelope still warm. He read it once, then again. Each word was a delicate blade. There were no accusations, no requests, only absence. He walked down the stairs with the steps of someone who has forgotten his own limits. He took the car keys without calling the driver, without telling Helena, without thinking. He just drove. It took him half an hour to find her walking along the side of the road, suitcase in hand, and the wind ruffling the loose strands of her hair. He pulled the car over violently, got out and stood in front of her, saying nothing. Noah stared at him, firm eyes, but there was something there he had never seen before. "Peace. I was going to come back one day," she said. "I wasn't going to let you. I'm not a trophy, Adrian. I know." He took a step away. "But you're what I really have left." She tightened the strap of her suitcase. "You saw me as a threat, then as a fake, then as a possibility. But I'm just me, and I don't know if that's enough anymore." He looked at her as if he were finally seeing. "Let me try to find out. With you." The wind blew. The world kept moving. But there, on that forgotten stretch of asphalt between the city and nothingness, two strangers who had signed a piece of paper, saw each other again for the first time, without a contract, without a coma, without a shield. Noah dropped her bag, and Adrian held her by the waist. No promises, just the beginning. Really. Months later, spring returned. The Valmont mansion, once cold and silent, now smelled of fresh coffee and open books. The garden that Noah tended in secret bloomed with lavenders and dahlias, some planted by her own hands, others by Adrian, who was still getting the digging wrong, but enjoyed the attempt. They didn't wear wedding rings. They didn't even talk about marriage. Not the way they used to. Now what existed between them didn't need contracts. It was simple and therefore unbreakable. Gale, on the other hand, was far away. He traveled weeks after Noah left, and never returned to the mansion. The Valmont Corp board discreetly removed him from executive positions after Adrian revealed, with evidence, the embezzlements his brother had made during his coma. Nothing was scandalous or public. Adrian didn't want war, just distance, and Gale never apologized. But he left a letter. She was his weak point. Now she's your strength. That makes you dangerous. Finally, Luna, Noah's sister, was recovering well. Adrian financed her treatment without any fuss. When asked why, he simply replied, "It's family." Noah went back to work, not as an employee of Valmont Corp, but as a social impact consultant. She created a project in her name. She rewrote her own story, with time, space, and love that needed no proof. In the last scene, Adrian enters the garden, still with a cup of tea in his hands, and his hair messy. Noah is kneeling among the flowers, dirty with dirt, smiling. He bends down beside her. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this house?" She stares at him, feigning innocence. "Did I dirty the carpets, perhaps?" "You saved everything," he replies, "including me." She kisses him slowly, without haste, as if to say to the world, "We started at the end, and yet, it worked."